Good evening. Good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of the School Building Committee for Lowell High School. We are being broadcast live, just so everybody knows. There was another event being scheduled in the City Council chamber, but it is live on LTC right now, so just FYI. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're here for a couple of things. One, to get a schedule on the project, the Lowell High School project, the construction update, the budget update, and next steps. Before we begin, I'm going to do a roll call for the School Building Committee members. By the way, I'm Eileen Donahue, the City Manager and Chair of the School Building Committee. Mike Vaughn. Here. Connie Martin. Superintendent Boyd. Here. Richard Underwood. Here. Good evening. Michael Fiato. Here. Connor Baldwin. Here. Jay Mason. Here. Christine Clancy. Billy Joe Turner. Mayor Chow. Maria Sheehy. Yeah. Ben Opara. David Peasley. Yeah. Erica Harvey. Here. Hi, Erica. Do you want to sit up here? Yeah, you can come on down. You can sit here or over there, wherever you're comfortable. Well, welcome. William Samaras. Senator Kennedy. Yeah. John Leahy. Rodney Elliott. Mary Ann Mancy. Here. Great. So we have a quorum. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So you should have all received the materials by email last week, which included the minutes from the December 9th meeting. If anybody has any questions, edits, suggestions, we'll just open the floor to the School Building Committee. If not, I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes. Senator Kennedy moves to accept, seconded by Rodney Elliott. All in favor? All opposed? Well, thank you. So let me just give a little bit of an introduction. We have here tonight our consultants, including representatives from Suffolk Construction, our construction manager, Rex Radloff and Sean Edwards. We also have with us our OPM, our project manager, Skanska, Mary Ann Williams and Jim Dowd. And additionally, we have our architects from the Perkins Eastman team, Joe Drown and Robin Greenberg. Thank you for being here. So there was a presentation last week at the City Council. This is a similar presentation to the School Building Committee to bring you up to date as to where we stand both on the schedule, on the construction update, and on the budget. So I think many of you may have heard when the final bid packages, that was the final third of the project, were opened 2 weeks ago. Finalized, I shouldn't say opened. They were finalized, descoped. There was an excess of the budget of $38.5 million. You're going to hear what constituted that and in a word, COVID and the impact on these particular materials and labor and construction costs. So without further ado, I in terms of the schedule and construction updates, is Suffolk taking the lead or Mary Ann? Okay, if Suffolk can please present. You'll need to speak right into a microphone. That's how it's being, oh, there's one over there. It's a little bit of the technical challenges. It's a little different than our normal setup, but bear with us.
I don't know if I'm blocking anyone's way.
Rex, sorry, if you don't mind, the
Oh,
issue
good.
is that,
Is that the issue?
directing the camera view.
It's not like in my living room.
Oh, the camera's behind.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay.
Do you mind if I step forward?
It should be recording for the television. Can everybody hear? Okay.
Perfect. It is now. Perfect. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Awesome. So again, today's presentation, we're going to go through the Phase 1 progress report. I'll share some photos, touch on schedule briefly. Then I'm going to dive into the final budget, which compares the what we're calling a draft GMP, guaranteed maximum price, and compare it to our 90% budget, which we reconciled over a year ago. From there, we're going to reflect on what is an increase from the 90% set to now, and go back to our estimating time frame to better understand where we came from and where we're going. Afterwards, we'll dive into market conditions, try to make sense of where that $38 million is coming from, and try to compare it to the market itself. And then from there, compare the market to COVID. So in a sense, make bringing a relationship together between COVID to the market conditions to the escalation in price, which we've been seeing. And finally, I'll wrap it up with a conclusion. And then lastly, we have some additional references that I think will be useful from this presentation for everyone's reference at a later time. So,
excuse me, Rex, I'm going to ask you to use this one,
Yeah,
because apparently we're getting
not
message that the audio is not working on that microphone.
Thank you. Is this better? Oh, I hope it's better. Someone will tell us. So, Phase 1 progress report. So, Phase 1 construction of the new gym, as everyone can see out when driving by. This is the shape this is the new gym coming along. We're probably 75% through, with a handful of months until turnover when the students come back. Our main focus right now, it being March, is our cow wall facade. Believe it or not, where all the tarping is right now, where there's a fair amount of work taking place, something called backup angle, which we're installing right now. It's really the framing for the cow wall. The cow wall is this translucent panel that will be installed within the facade of the gym in the coming months. That's where the tarps are right now. So you'll see that go in, and the tarps coming down. It'll start to really take shape as a building. Also, on the inside of the building itself, we're wrapping up overhead MEPs, a term I use quite a bit with these updates: mechanical, electrical, plumbing. It takes up probably 75% of construction activities. And I'll share some photos on that. So that's finally coming to an end, which is exciting. And then gym equipment. There's been a big push for all things gym so we could actually start to build out the wood floor itself, which is in the next month. I'll share some photos on the gym equipment itself. And then the next months we have April, we're chasing permanent power, which is a major milestone for us. That's with National Grid coming towards the end of April. We'll begin our startups. That's short for turning on the equipment itself. So we don't just turn over the building and turn on the equipment. We got to turn it on with plenty of time to make sure it's commissioned properly. So that's what we're pushing towards. Wood flooring, of course, is what I just touched on. That's a major milestone we've been tracking actually for many months now. And it's one that forces everything out of the space and everything complete up overhead. So it just means construction is well underway when something like wood floor takes place. And then ceilings, very similar to wood flooring. Before we do ceilings, everything above the ceiling needs to be complete and everything below needs to be cleared out. So another major milestone for us. That is actually starting a little early, which is a huge plus within the locker room. So but we're going to be hitting that hard next April. And then May and June and July, not to browse through them too quickly, it's really just finishes, getting flooring down, toilet accessories in, toilet partitions in, specialties, that's what we call them. We'll have curtain wall also installed, so it's not just the cow wall installed, but also curtain wall when it gets warmer out. Some landscaping will start up as well. So you'll see curbing go down next month, but then also some of the greenscape will go down, our hardscape as well, that's the plaza area, will go down as well. And then June and July, wrapping it up with finishes, final inspections. We have a very good relationship with the building department right now to gear them up for those inspections. And then July, bring in some furniture and then do our final certificate of occupancy and get ready for turnover for the students and faculty in the August and September timeframe. Right now, as far as schedule goes, we're tracking. We're in really good shape. It's been it's been quite a challenge building through COVID, but we've been able to do so to this point. So we're looking forward to turning over this building for the students to come back, that being the gym, and then moving forward with the existing gym takedown, and then the back end of the existing 1980s building, as well as the south bridge. So those activities will be taking place in the fall timeframe. So with that, I'm going to move ahead, share some photos, and give some context to it. So this is the new gym right now. This was actually taken last week. The underside of the joists have been painted, all overhead MEPs. That's our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, or at least mechanical and electrical and fire protection in this case, have been in. Very difficult to see because they blend in quite well with the white, intentional, of course. And then we have our lighting in as well, some speakers. And then our gym equipment is starting up with our basketball hoops. We also have shot put nets, batting cages, etc. that will be going in the next month. So once this is complete, we'll be able to clear out this space and get that wood floor going within the gym. Also, when that wood floor is done, we'll continue on with the track. We'll get the bleachers in, but that all comes afterwards, and those trays are pretty straightforward. Oh, real quick, I'm going to go back real fast. This is the tarping that will be coming down in the next handful of weeks, and the cow wall system will be going in. And that's what I think everyone's very familiar seeing the building right now. So we're excited to do that because visually it's good for the public, if you will, to get a nice look of progress. So this is the first floor, and this is what the building looks like. Believe it or not, there's a ton of work that has happened in these spaces. This being our main corridor, all overhead mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all insulated, labeled, in place. These are systems that we coordinated months in advance and are able to get in. Afterwards, this space will look like, I would say probably in the next 4 to 5 weeks, this space will have have ceiling grid up, be cleared out. We'll toss on a couple more coats of paint, get our doors and hardware, or doors and hardware go later, but finishes will start to roll into this space. This is our wrestling room, another area where we'll have ceilings in the next handful of weeks. Actually, the grid itself for this space, the ceiling grid, will go in the beginning of, or the first week in April. So that's in 2 weeks. And then lastly, this is just a typical locker room. We have a handful of these on the first floor as well as the second floor. And What you see here is, again, overhead mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and you could actually see some wires coming down. This will be supporting the future grid coming in the next. Actually, this room was gridded this week, believe it or not. This photo is actually from last week. So grid will be taking place in these areas, and then afterwards we'll get lockers in, epoxy flooring, etc. So we're in really good shape for these areas. You know, some of the better, more visually inciting photos really are going to be taking place come the May timeframe when final finishes are coming in. Final layers of final paint will be happening as well. Doors, hardware, etc. And then lastly, I'm sharing a mechanical room here. This is our multi-stack chillers. We also have boilers set, AHU set, built out all within the first floor, and then also the third floor and the mezzanine. Keep in mind, we're in this building first, the gym, because it's supplying the mechanical, electrical services, fire protection services for all of the West building. So it's very important that we get this in, and there's a fair amount of work that we have to do, more so than just a typical building. And then, of course, some facade shots. I think everyone's very familiar with what the building looks like on the outside, but it's going to get dressed up very nicely, especially in the next month, starting with curb, and again with landscaping. That cow wall is going to go in, and then this back end you'll have some metal panels that's going in once it gets much warmer out as well. So this is really the state of the building in right now, and again we're in a really good shape schedule wise. So with that said, I'm going to now dive in to the budget itself. And
before you do that,
absolutely.
I just have one question. You remember that at the last meeting that we had, we decided that there would be a tour for this committee at some point. And so I just wanted to remind you about that. And I guess from listening to your remarks just now that May would be the time to do that.
I think May would be an exceptional time to walk through while construction's still going on, but far enough along where you could see the final shape take place.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and we're ready for that as well. Okay, so the next handful of slides I'm going to discuss on the budget, the evolution of the budget, market conditions, COVID, etc., which I touched on briefly in the beginning. So what I'm sharing here is what we're calling our draft guaranteed maximum price, or GMP. This is the maximum price which we have established for the project itself, not to be confused with some of our prior budgets, which led to this this point. Right now, our GMP is standing at $381 million to keep it short. That's about $38 million over our 90% CD set, or 11% over. So something happened there, and I'd like to share with everyone the evolution of what got here. However, before I do that, I want to point out to a few items within the budget. The budget has contingencies. It has $7 million in a construction contingency. It has $21 million, or a combined $23 million in owner's contingency. These contingencies will be used for unforeseens, expected unforeseens that happen throughout the course of construction, either on the construction side or the owner side. And we feel this is adequate for this or a size of this job. And also, none of it has been spent today. Absolutely.
So, and I don't know if anybody has a meeting, but the latest one is talk about contingency after. I have notes that said that the contingency was up to $50 million. There was a $21 million owner contingency, which is there. And then I also noticed that the combined owner and construction was $30 million. So there's a $20 million difference between the February 2020 meeting, which was February 24th, and now. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, so I think what has happened is, you know, we use the term contingency very loosely, not realizing that it may lead to some confusion on exactly what contingency we're talking about. There's really two buckets of contingencies. One is during building out the budget itself, and another is post budget. So the contingencies that I'm sharing here is after the budget has been established and to be used during construction.
The $50 million in February, it wasn't actually. Just what you estimated? Is that-
No, so the contingencies that we had, that we shared beforehand, those contingencies can be broken up into two parts. One part being for escalation that is anticipated within a budget. So when we build out a budget, when we build out a budget, there's always a time frame between establishing a budget and buying out the trades. That time frame naturally has escalation. If it takes us 6 months to buy out a trade for some reason, it is always a natural tendency that the market goes up 2, 3, 4, 5%. So we anticipate that. That's escalation contingency, and that's bought in with the budget. And then another contingency is a design contingency. Because of the nature of this contract, where we get in early with the architect, we're able to facilitate the design to approach a budget, or to have it help the design navigate towards a budget navigate towards a budget over time, and then any overage, we're able to reduce that contingency accordingly. I know it seems a little cloudy at that point, but in short, it's just unforeseen scope to be allocated at a later type. But to take a step back, there's certain contingencies we use during the budget and then afterwards. And those that we used up early on, we were able to absorb it within the 38 million. So this 38 million was actually much higher. It was about 50 million, and then we absorb about $12 million worth of contingencies to bring it down. Exactly. It's always a cloudy subject, and but it's something that it's because of the nature of our contracts that allow us to navigate and build these budgets in a very responsible manner. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving forward. So, so out of this 11%, there's some major key influencers that really drove the majority of this, or of the majority of the 38 million. 23 million came from steel, curtain wall, and drywall, specific to phase 2 through 4. And in the next slides, we're going to look at the market conditions and how the market shifted for specifically those trades. And then lastly, I want to point everyone's attention to not just so much the $38 million over, but the 11% over. It's a very important metric to think of this in respect to something, and that something being the size of the project. So we're 11% over based on a 90% set, which is something that we're going to make sense of in the next slides as well. Okay. So with that said, I want to take a step back and share with everyone our estimating timeline. And so this project was estimated first back in 2019, January of 2019, on a schematic design set, or a CD or an SD set. This set is really equivalent to that drawing something up on a napkin, if you will. It's enough for us to price something up, but not enough for us to build on by any means. However, we're able to do a very good assessment, understanding how much the job will be, and then facilitate that design by working with Perkins Eastman throughout the next documents that come out afterwards, to make sure that we're always on that target. We did this again, or I should say PM&C did it initially, January of 19, Skanska, February of 19. When Suffolk was hired on, we did this in August of 19. We were able to reconcile to the same number. Afterwards, that allowed Perkins Eastman to go back and continue on with the design. And about a year later, when the 60% set was issued, that's a set of documents that is 60% complete, if you will. 40% of the scope is still to be further refined, further defined. We were able to reconcile again, essentially at that number, 270, and then again with the 90% set at 274.44. So before I go to March, we were working with a number of 274.44 for about 2 years. And this isn't something where we just one person comes together and we just estimate. It's a reconciliation process. So Suffolk's team of estimators get together with PM&C, And we're able to look through the budget on a line-by-line basis and reconcile on a line-by-line basis and come to an agreement. So it's a very thorough process. It's actually a very lengthy process. It takes upwards to about 12 hours per reconciliation, and an exhausting effort, if you could imagine. But it's a very good way to make sure that everyone is looking at this job in the same light. We didn't just do it once, but we did it many times before. So this is the driving strategy to make sure that budgets are maintained from the beginning all the way to the end. On past projects, this effort proves to be true all the way through to that bid set and all the way through the project. However, something obviously drastically changed on this effort. When we came around in March of 2022, our new revised budget was $305 million, which was substantial to what we saw before. Now, what we'll see usually during the bid document, we will see a higher figure, but we're always able to offset it going back to that escalation contingency and that design contingency, almost specifically that, to bring it back. And at that time, when we were at our 90% set, we had about $12 million in those contingencies that we could have actually gone over. We could have gone over to 282 and brought it back. But we went well over that and brought it only back to 305. So something extraordinary happened here. And of course, and I think everyone in this room is familiar with market conditions is something that has been quoted before. And I'd like to share exactly that next. So in these next handful of slides, I'm providing some references from AGC, the Association of General Contractors. What I was mentioning before with this association, it's a very reputable source. It's one that all parties use on the owner side, architect side, and also the contractor side. We reference it to really understand the pulse of where the construction industry is standing right now. Of course, everything needs to be substantiated, but it's a really good check with what we're looking at. The first thing I'll share was the Material Producer Price Index, PPI. It's a very fancy way to say cost of goods. And we'll compare those costs of goods versus some of those major packages that we have. We'll also take a look at the cost of goods versus the Lowell High School budget itself, the overall budget, that 11%. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at bid price versus cost. So going back to when we bid the job versus how much or when we established the budget versus how much the job cost, what that looked like. So the very first slide I'm sharing, Material Producer Price Index or material cost. This is a chart I'm showing from 4/20, that's 2020 or April of 2020, all the way to December of 2021. As you can see, the market accelerated tremendously within this time frame. Now, you see material increases of 139%, 64%, 63%, all the way to 13%. Now, this is very unusual. We usually see month-to-month, year-to-year increases 3 to 5%, if anything. So to see something like this is significant and very hard to forecast. So the very first milestone I'd like to share with everyone is something called our early bid packages. These are packages we actually buy out before we even establish our 90% budget. It's a very useful way to actually get a jump start on construction while we continue to build out the budget itself. This involved, by the way, phase 1 steel, concrete, demo, waterproofing, and site work. So those 5 trades were able to get a jump start while we were establishing the budget. And that's why you saw construction happen in October while we were working on a budget for December. The next milestone, which is the most important milestone, is when our 90% estimate came out. This was on 12/11 of 2020. And everything within this estimate captured the market conditions before. We know that because we were living in this time frame and we knew exactly where the market was. So we were able to capture any fluctuations before and everything leading up to it. Now, This is the most important milestone here because this is exactly what we're comparing everything against. That $38 million is compared versus the 90% estimate. Now, shortly after, the bid set was issued. So between the 90% estimate and the bid set, this is effectively that more or less that last 10%. However, you could already see that the market was starting to increase actually dramatically. We had about a 20% increase in lumber, a 20% increase in steel alone that wasn't foresawn at the time of this 90% estimate. And again, to go back to these increases, we usually see just a handful of percent. We don't see the market go up like this by any means, nor could have been foresawn as such. So with that said, once the bid set was issued, then we were able to start to buy out the job. We are not able to buy out the job here. Oh, excuse me. We're not able to buy out the job here because this is not a bid set. Only here were we able to buy out the job. So right off the bat, we were in a losing position when it came out to buying out this project. The very first milestone with buyout, or the very first major milestone with buyout, was our file subbids, which was about $125 million. These are trades that Suffolk is not in control of buying out, but however are bought out through the Chapter 149A process, and are awarded more or less to us. Now, out of that $125 million, these trades were about 5% over the budget, which is something which was very significant, and it was the very first indicator that there was something above and beyond what we originally estimated. 5% is not 11%, but it's still significant. So we knew something was up at that point. So we continued to buy out the project. Now, not to make light of anything within this this bidding period, the remaining packages, less the steel, the current wall, and the drywall for phase 2 through 4, only came in about 1% over the budget, actually less than 1% over the budget. They were almost on budget, about $300,000 off. That was about $80 million worth of work. Now, the reason why I'm breaking them out is because we had to have a discussion as a team on what we do with steel, current wall, and drywall, because we're seeing steel prices, aluminum prices, gypsum prices skyrocket, which were major drivers within these packages. Those are the main materials within these packages. The rest of the packages do not carry materials such to that degree. So file subbids were over about 5%. The remaining packages were over about less than 1%. However, we still had an issue to deal with about a third of the project to buy out. And so around this time frame, and it was right after the file subbids, right when lumber was the highest, steel was accelerating, and so was everything else. We got together internally. We got together with our in-house estimators, and most importantly, we got together with the bidders, which we were soliciting at the time. And we talked about where the market is at now, where the market is going. Now, of course, the saying goes, if I knew where the market was going, I wouldn't be working here. But the reality is no one really knew, but everyone had a really good assessment on where the market was going. And the consensus at the time was we're at the top of a bubble. We haven't seen escalation like this ever. And to see it continue to be sustained would mean that construction jobs would not be able to continue. So there was a consensus made, or a calculated risk made at that time, that let's defer packages for steel, current wall, and drywall until the fall time frame, and monitor the market on a monthly basis as we go. And that's exactly what we did. And it wasn't until the fall time frame that procurement, that is lead times or procurement for materials, started to really grow in time. And we knew that this was the time to buy those packages. And so we did lock those in. We started to bid them out in the fall time frame, and then we signed them up right after the winter time. And so that's the history of our bidding. That's the history of where the market is with respect to our estimating timeframes in our bidding window. But what I want to do now is, after sharing this, is I want to understand with everyone here exactly how did those packages look when compared to the market conditions themselves. Steel up 139%, lumber 64%, which, by the way, came down quite a bit. That's a heavy hitter for drywall specifically. Aluminum, gypsum, and plastic components. However, before I talk about those packages with this, one last metric I want to show, and I'm kind of jumping around, is how does the market look? How did AGC see a project of this type? The budget, the impact on the budget of this construction type look like? Sorry, I'm fumbling over my words here, just to get to the point. So AGC was able to make an assessment of all different types of projects. New school building construction being one, new office building construction, healthcare, we have highways, single family units, so a wide range. But also they were able to understand the price increases based on when the budget was established versus when the project was bought in full. And what they were able to find for a new school building construction, which happened to be exactly what we have, being estimated in July of 2021, which is exactly our predicament, and being bought in January of 2022 in full, with this, which is exactly our predicament as well. They were able to see that there was a 12.3% increase across the industry or across the country, specific to new school building constructions. Now, I'm not going to pretend that we throw this up here and this is just this is just perfectly how it is, or this is something we would reference beforehand. However, it is a very nice check afterwards with what this job looked like. Now, if everyone can recall, we were over about 11%, which marries in almost exactly with what the AGC was seeing for this type project specific to the type of window that we're falling in. And to share exactly everything we just looked at, Phase 2 through 4 steel, current wall drywall, we're seeing overages of 80%, 22%, 76%. When compared to the material costs, we fall within the window. It's a very large window. However, there's labor factored in here. There's only so far we could go with proving out market conditions. However, we're following in line with the increases. And of course, the most compelling being, well, what's the aggregate of the impact? And that is the overall budget is an 11% over when compared to about 12% over. So making sense of how the budget evolved versus the market is one thing, but how does the market evolve versus COVID? There's, other than just showing, to take a step back, essentially COVID came and it shut down factories. And from there was a loss of labor. And from there, I'm skipping around. I apologize, guys. You know what? I'm going to skip past this one. It's really just a supplemental to everything we just went through. But just talking about COVID, in short, this is just a couple of excerpts being shared. I'm not going to read it off, but factory shut down. There was a loss of labor, backed up demand, and it comes down to supply and demand. I'm not going to sit here as an economist. However, that's why the market was fluctuated as much as it did. We see it day to day with lead times. We see it day to day with prices. But essentially, as we find ourselves in this bottleneck right now, we're between backed up demand and inflated costs. So I'm just going to wrap this up with a brief conclusion on a couple talking points that I think are the most substantial driving points here. The first thing is our 90% budget was reconciled 5 different times between January of 2019 and December of 2020. This is something that we have done on numerous other jobs with success, not just through the budgeting phase, but through the GMP phase and completion of work itself. So it's a sound process. On average, each scope of work was bid by 3 subcontractors, which provides for a cost-saving environment. As everyone knows, get 3 bids, you get the best number, you create for good competition there, and which we did. The largest price increases corresponded almost directly with the market. That's steel, current wall, drywall. If everyone can recall, we had a 5% overage with file subbids, 1% with the rest. It is not favorable, but it's most definitely not as substantial as those packages we just looked at. And then, of course, the fluctuation with the market corresponded directly with COVID. The market's going up, and so is this world of COVID that we live in. And then lastly, I'm sharing just an overall budget increase of that $38 million. The majority is it from that steel, current wall, drywall, which is driven by our material increases, our trade costs, which is following just the overall inflation of the market, and then our final items are calculated based on a % of the construction cost. So if the cost of construction goes up, so does something like a contingency. Because for us to use contingency, we're buying the same materials that have now inflated as well. That being an example. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to any comments or questions anyone may have. And thank you.
Thank you, Rex. So if we'll go around and see if people have questions, but I just want to remind the members of the school building committee, speak into the microphone because otherwise they can't hear you at home. So we'll need to share the microphones if people have questions. Rodney Elliott.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Given the fact that the cost of goods services increased as a result of market conditions, let's say in phases 3 and 4, several years out, presumably the cost of goods is going to drop. Will we realize through this project those savings? I mean, these costs can't consistently remain as they are.
So to answer your question directly, no. However, those trades are just as equally on the hook for if the costs continue to go up, which is, no one really knows where the costs are going to be. That's the risk that the subcontractors are buying and locking in, because something like escalation is not allowed. So if there is a savings, that savings would be held by the subcontractor. But if there's an overage with the subcontractor, that overage wouldn't be passed on to us either.
I mean, the savings could be significant, and that would clearly just widen the subcontractor's profit margin. We're not going to realize any of those, what I would say, just dramatic increases in
So
costs.
the structure of the contracts that we have are lump sum, and it doesn't give any room for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm astounded that the estimating timeline is dollar for dollar the same thing at December 3rd of 20 that it was 2 years prior in January of 2019. And I'm wondering, that doesn't even include any inflation. So is that normal? Is it usual that a project, especially one of this scale, would continue to budget in at the same number?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and it will help further underline the reason why we have something called escalation contingency. So back in 2019, we had an escalation contingency of $15 million. And when we go in and rebid or put together a new budget for the project as the drawings develop, it is true that you do have further escalation within the market, and that escalation gets absorbed within that contingency itself. So that's one of the main reasons why we have it. So when we get to 2 years worth of bidding, we allow ourselves to absorb up to $15 million worth of escalation, which is a responsible way to bid the job because of a project like this scale, it takes so much time, so we have to consider that. So that's one of the reasons why that price is able to be exactly the same, is both escalation contingency for that purpose and also a design contingency.
So this process did not end up being different, or this is not an atypical situation?
No, what happened was those contingencies that we had between 2019 and 2020, those 5 estimates, the market wasn't as aggressive as it was afterwards. And then
Hold on a sec.
If you press the button, they should turn green, and that means
Yeah.
perfect. Yes. So essentially, the markets weren't accelerating as much as they were after that 90% set. And then anything that did increase at that time, we were able to absorb within that contingency, since it was relatively subtle with respect to after that 90% set was issued.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Mike?
Are all the filed subbids fully executed right now?
Yes, they are.
Hold on. Mr. Samaras, if you can speak right into the microphone.
I know how to do it. No, thank you for the presentation, but I'm going to try to ask some questions like why people got so concerned about this project, okay? You have a city council right now that, got the shock, we'll say, of the rise in prices. But at the same time, we're cognizant of what's going on nationally. There's no question about that. But I'm talking about some maybes in a sense. It was between January 2019 and December 2020 with the 90% budget, when you're doing the reconciliations and other things. Could that process have been sped up? Knowing that the market has changed. In other words, what you're used to, say, for the past 10 or 15 years, especially the last 10 years, the market's been, inflation's been very much under control. You had the possible rise in prices built into it. But then all of a sudden, because of COVID, we have an uncontrolled situation. But I think the expectation here is that we hired some of the biggest companies in the country. And basically, we're relying on your knowledge, okay, of trends. And actually, you're the people that set the trends, in a sense, because of how much you buy and when you do buy it. So I understand right now, because of the timing, we're in a fix. But at any time, could there have been a process where saying, you know what, there's something going on in the world, and maybe we should step up. In other words, go back to the city manager and say, look, we have to do some recalculating. It might cost you a little extra now, but we think down the road. Am I talking?
No, it's a very fair question.
That's on people's minds.
Yeah, and especially in hindsight, in hindsight, you look at the market and it's, well, of course, but, if you take away all the information we've had since, it's not so evident. Going back to the budgetary process where we start with the schematic designs in the 60s and the 90s, that time frame took place really in a manner that was as quick as possible, especially with how complicated this job is. This project isn't just big, it is complicated. It's 4 buildings put together, and that process really took place in a manner that was, and I think, Joe, are you going to, I thought you were going to add to it. Oh, perfect, awesome.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. You will remember, though, that when all of us first heard about COVID, it was later. And when we did hear about COVID, this was kind of the first time any of us heard of a pandemic in over 100 years. And the advice we were getting was mixed from the national level and local level. So for us to be able to know where that was going 2 years down the road was unprecedented. So even though both of our firms have national reputations, knowing that in advance could not have happened. What we did do is we went through a lengthy process, as you can see through Rex's presentation, of accountability through multiple estimates. And at each time, we transferred some of that contingency into the construction cost. So we didn't have a separate lump sum that was on top of the 270. The 270 included those contingencies. And as we became more, we understood the design better, and the estimators could put a better price to it, the contingencies were reduced, but that 270 stayed the same.
Thanks. No, I understand the answer to the question. Okay, but there's another thing. city manager's been put in a position where she's come before us to give us, these are the facts. In other words, when she gives a report, it has to be based on something. We know that. But could there ever been a time during the past 2 years that the climate could have been discussed? I understand you can't go out and discuss bids and say, the world's ending, prices are going up, woe is us, because people would step in, and I know you'd lose control of your bids and what have you. But was there ever a chance to sit down with the council and city manager to discuss what was going on? Was that possible? That's what people are asking me. You know, why didn't that happen? You have these big companies, they know what's going on, but I understand no one knew what was going on because everything was brand new. COVID is what happened 100 years ago. We're in a totally different society. Education's changed. Everything that we know has changed. But the thing is, people, because this project is something that everybody wants to see work, whether you were for Cawley or downtown, the one thing is they want the high school built. I feel that is very strong, you know, in the city. And they're concerned what type of controls we'll have. So, two questions. The first question, could we have gotten more information? And basically, how do we look at the future?
I wasn't sure if you're going on that one.
No, these are questions that are very difficult to answer. I understand that, but you understand what the type of feeling that's out there and the concerns, and we have to rely on you, and the city manager has to rely on what you present her, that she presents to now the city council that wants to, you know, be able to do their job.
So if we go way back in time, we were brought on to this project in February 2016. That was 6 years ago and 1 month now. At the time of the schematic design estimate, because I have all of the estimates here, shorthand version of it, all of those estimates were reconciled within 1% of each other. And when we were looking at the value of the trade costs, the subcontractors, and then we were looking at the fact that we were only 15% into design, and yet we were submitting a budget that had to stand the test of time going out until the end of 2026, we had to make projections about what kind of escalation would take place. So Skanska, as well as PM&C, we independently looked back 10 years, looked at what the escalation was, looked at what the trends were in the most recent 3 years, and then we extrapolated what we thought based on history, and then based on more current history, what we thought the trends in escalation would be. And so when we talk about escalation, even before Suffolk was brought on board, we were looking at about $235 million, and then all these other contingencies on top of that got us to the $270 million. And those contingencies had to do with escalation, had to do with design, and had to do with really developing the design and identifying the scope. Anyone that has experience with design and construction, they'll tell you that when you're at a schematic design level and you have about 15% of the information, they're not buildable documents, but they're documents that you're able to extrapolate scope for schools, et cetera, what the costs are, and follow that through in a budgetary process. So it wasn't anything that was done in a vacuum. It was a very sound process. It's a process that we followed. It's very linear and prescriptive, the MSBA process. And not only did we submit at schematic design, and reconciling two independent estimates, but when we brought Suffolk on board, we asked them to take a look at it and get their feedback. What do you think about what we're seeing? So when we went from the 235 up to 270 million, we kept reducing that escalation in design contingency, targeting, because the 270 was always the targeted budget. Okay. So that being said, it was a very responsible process, and then each time we would submit to the Mass School Building Authority, they actually had an independent peer review that would go on as well. They had a separate design team that reviewed the drawings and the design for completeness, accuracy, etc. They reviewed the estimates in terms of is it in line with what they're seeing in the market. They actually have an incredible database of all of those core projects in schools that they were doing and an understanding of those square foot costs. So there was no red flags for anyone. So when we established the project scope and budget agreement, February 20th, 2019, COVID didn't start showing up until well over a year later in February of 2020, and went on for about 6 to 8 months before people even realized or thought there was going to be a cost impact to it. It wasn't showing up in the market. So that's unfortunate that none of us had a crystal ball, but it was a sound process that we had gone through. And just like now with the Ukraine, no one ever thought we might be in a situation now where we might see a spike in prices again over time. I mean, there are things that we're in a global economy. There are things that happen in the world that are sometimes above and beyond our control.
If I may, let me try. Rex, go back to that one graph on the progress of the drawings. And I think, Joe, what Mr. Maris is asking is from an acceleration perspective. If you go through our 5 budgets and you go from an SD to 90%, it took 2 years. That's what he's asking. We couldn't have predicted what happened, of course, in COVID. But I think the question is, could the design have been accelerated? You know, and maybe it would be helpful to walk them through how you go from SD to 60%, 90%, and really why the time frame is this. And I think that's his question.
If I could interrupt, I don't believe that's his question, sir.
No, it is.
All right. So there's another part here from the former head of school here that there's an erosion of trust here, and we have an identified losing position on May of 2021. So the question is, as that was your words, your statement, I quoted that. Sir, you looking at the screen, you identified yourself as being in a losing position, 5% over estimate. Your first indicator was in May of 2021. So the larger part of the question here is what information was being shared with our city manager, what information was being shared with our city council so that we could prepare for the messaging so there wasn't an erosion of trust with our community that we serve on behalf of. Was there some additional messaging information that could be shared so we could share it with our families? If that was known in May of 2021, why are we hearing about it in March of 2022 for the first time? And Mr. Mayor, if I am summarizing your request accurately, I believe that's what I heard.
He was addressing the first part, but you're correct. You understand? I know you do. I mean,
I was answering the first part.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
On the May of 2021, I'm not.
False if it's given.
Oh, right. Right. Okay. So I apologize. So you're asking at that point what was communicated? Or what was not communicated, respectfully?
What could have been?
What could have been?
Could have been communicated.
You know, again, collectively as a smaller group, we did discuss, we did see the trend, we did see the market going up. We saw that the packages were actually, from a trajectory perspective, going upward. I don't know if it's our position as the CM to be communicating to certain councils or whatnot, but collectively as a smaller group, we made the decision to hit pause on those 3 packages, like Rex had mentioned, and then to see them again in fall or late summer. As far as a communication perspective, respectfully, I can't speak to that as the construction manager. That's not our role in the project.
If I could redirect that then. So this is now the 4th or 5th large-scale construction project that I've been charged with as superintendent. The OPM is who I would look towards, and I would ask kindly, what else can we do to restructure this relationship
so we don't get surprised again, so that we can build the trust factor back with our community. Because if there was a year lead time where we can prepare our families for this type of news, I think our families are receptive to that. Everybody's been living through a pandemic. Everybody understands that the cost of all goods are increasing. And when you're seeing it increase over a year's time and we can message to our families, then there's not the shock factor that we experience in March. And $38 million is significant. So is there a way that we can operationalize this differently going forward so we can build back that trust? So when something is said, we trust it. Because right now I'm hearing May walkthrough, and Mr. Senator, I don't know how that feels to you to be told a May walkthrough when we've had these types of surprises, but to me that feels far too out into the future for what feels comfortable for me to build back the trust with the community. So, Madam Manager, if that's better directed towards you, I would redirect it.
Well, I don't decide when the project, when they think it's safe to bring a large group. But I do think to your point and what has been said here and said at the school, the last city council meeting, was that in the spring and summer there was a determination they thought we were at the top of the bubble, so they wanted to wait. That was and the waiting was the hope that these were going to come back down. There wasn't anything more concrete to communicate. Just wait, because this bubble looks like we're at the top, and then monitor it, go back out, and see if it's coming down. I think what our consultants have been saying is it didn't come down, and then the lead time on materials lengthened, and they went back out. As far as the having that number, the 38 million, that wasn't known until this month.
Sorry, to answer that question, I mean, we between Skanska and Suffolk and Perkins Eastman, we can put a monthly report together that shows progress update, shows just what Rex went through tonight, went through schedule, went through budget, went through progress photos, things to that nature. So these meetings should be held monthly, and you'll have a report prior to, so that you can actually be prepared to ask questions. You can see budget updates, you can see RFIs, you can see submittals, and all this stuff that we typically can put in a package that should be submitted monthly to build back that trust.
And Mr. Superintendent, as you know, you and your team participate in the OAC meetings every Thursday, where there are updates and discussions on everything on these projects. So, but to the point when we met in December, we were waiting to see what these packages were going to look like, and then we got the information in March.
So I appreciate that, Madam. I appreciate that answer, Madam Manager. I will tell you that the information that came to me is to not expect this to be on budget. That was the information internally, based on our internal estimates, based on our facilities department, as early January. I did have separate meetings with some of the elected officials sitting behind me. That was their projection as well, based on the information provided to them. And then the public information that was coming out at the same time was that it was on schedule, on budget until March. So it is.
Now, let me interrupt, because anytime I spoke about this, I said we expect these to be over budget. Okay, this was in January, in February, even before that. Looking at what's happening in the world conditions, do I know how much over budget? No, nobody did until the bids were descoped and finalized. And so, that was not something that wasn't revealed. It was. We just didn't have that number. So I just want to be clear on that. And in terms of being able to bring a specific number to the community, we didn't have that ability to do that.
I appreciate that, and I have a great deal of respect for your leadership, and have been honored to serve alongside of you as superintendent during your tenure as city manager. I think my goal here, or my question, would be for our OPM, and how do we, going forward, structure this relationship so that there aren't surprises going forward, so we don't find that there are conversations where we're projecting or doing our own forecasting that turns out to be more accurate than what we are relaying to the community at large. And so how do we do that, and how do we make that happen as this committee, this body, so that as we go forward, we can share the risk that we're taking, which it sounds like we were taking an educated risk to hope that the market was going to come back down.
That was what we were told, that they think we're at the top of the bubble. And rather than buy at the top of the bubble, let's wait because everything's telling us it's going to come down.
And to go back to the question that was asked earlier about, well, gee, what if prices come down? Are we going to realize any savings there? That was the very reason why, when we were at the top of the bubble, we were getting that feedback from subcontractors. We had subcontractors saying, I'm holding my bid for 24 hours, for 72 hours. It wasn't a sufficient amount of time to descope for the volume of work that we're talking about. A couple of thousand pages of drawings, several thousand pages of specifications. When we did get the bids, and we didn't do this in isolation. We had conversations with the city manager's office. The 6 years we've been working on the project, we have not been going directly to the city council, because prior to this administration, the process remained the same the last 6 years. So we talked about, here's the bids that we have. These are the bids that have come in. We applied some of that pricing and escalation contingency to those foul sub bids to say, look, there's a trend here. We don't know if it's going to go down or continue to go up, because the feedback from the subcontracting community was that this was a bubble. And, so that was the conversation we had. We had a discussion as a group to say, what do we think? Do we guarantee an overage now, or do we wait a few months and see if the market corrects itself, and then later it's like it's a non-issue. But the market didn't correct itself. But please don't think anybody was concealing information, because that is not what took place here. And so we discussed it among the companies, the city manager's office, and we still hadn't received all of the bidding information to know what that final number was going to be. All we could really point to was the trend.
So, knowing what we know now, and the budget was built way back when, but so wasn't the contingency, can we expect that part of it to go up in the contingency? In knowing the things that we've found in the last couple of years that have come up that were not in the original scope, such as the stairs, the water mitigation that was not part, do you still feel comfortable that the contingency that was built in 2 years ago is going to be significant and enough to...
The $30 million in contingency that we have there takes those things into consideration.
So again, you're confident with everything we know now in looking at the cost increases and everything, that original contingency?
With everything we know now, yes. Yes. And what we said was the construction value for the subcontractors and trade costs went up about 34.5 million. And when we saw the trend of the 11% overall across the trades, we recommended that the contingency also be increased by that 11%, because if you're buying materials in the future, you need to take that into account.
Thank you.
So,
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you. I probably have, I think, just maybe two questions. But before that, I would like to say that if we knew that the costs were going up back then, back in May of 21, although we couldn't have done anything and wouldn't have known that it was going to be 38 million, it still would have been easier. We would have been able to anticipate that there was going to be a cost increase, which I think has some value. And I think that's probably that's a good argument for having this committee meet. I don't know that we need to meet once a month, but once every 2 months. Even if a meeting is only 5 or 10 minutes long and nothing's happened, I think it's still good to have this, and that's the function of this committee, is to do that. So I think that, going forward, it would be good if we could meet once every 2 months. I think it's beneficial. And I don't think that there's probably a lot to gain, although I have to say that if it was not the construction company's responsibility, whose responsibility was it? And I'm not asking for an answer for that because I don't think that that matters at this point. I think that I prefer to look forward of, how are we going to get out of this $38 million problem and to talk about the project going forward. So I was able to watch on television a couple of weeks ago your presentation before the City Council. And one of the issues that came up was what's in the walls of the 1922 building. And I think your response was that you've explored the walls completely. And so I'm assuming that you did that enough that you're completely comfortable as to what's there and what it's going to take to do that phase of the construction. So when people talk about, well, it's 38 million, and I think they're wondering if a year or two, is it going to be another 38 million, or is it going to be another? And I think you said your answer at that meeting was, nope, we should be locked in where we are. But can you just talk about what you did in terms of investigation of the 22 building that makes you be so comfortable to do that? And I also think that there was a little bit of discussion about the stairs, which I didn't really, that's the first time I ever heard about the stairs, but can you talk about that? I think that there's real worry in the community too about going forward. Is it going to be another shoe that's going to drop? Not now, but next year, 2 years from now, is this going to cost more money? And so I think it's important for people to be comfortable or assured that is not going to happen.
Yeah, so the exploratory that took place was hand in hand with Perkins Eastman and
Rex, can you talk into the microphone?
Excuse me. The exploratory that took place was we were able to partner with Perkins Eastman, FBRA, also GGD, the electrical engineer, and we were able to probe throughout all of the building, if it's the slabs, the foundations, the roof, the walls, and make sense of the structure and the makeup of the building itself. Many of those details that are in the drawings now were a result of that exploratory. Now, with that said, we are very comfortable that we have captured it all. However, anything that may be unforeseen, in which we will come across unforeseens, is anticipated within that contingency. The stair example is a perfect case for to be used for contingency. It's something that would have been great to have caught beforehand, but it's being caught now, and it goes against contingency, just like anything else that would be the case in projects like this, a renovation of sorts.
What is the issue with the stairs? Why do you think that it wasn't caught beforehand, and how come it got caught now? What is that? And what's,
You want to answer that?
and also, can you put some sort of a price estimate on what that is? What's involved with that?
Right. So what we've learned through the investigations that have happened to date is that there's some failure in one of the stairwells, and it's the some of the angles that are supporting the treads, and it happens at one flight from what we understand, and it wasn't totally visible from what my people tell me at the time of our investigation. So what we're doing is we did our investigation to see what the problem was. We're coming up with a solution to fix it, and Suffolk is going to implement that fix. So the work that we will be doing as a result of this is there is going to be some removal of paint on a lot of the existing stairs that are remaining, to inspect those angles to see if this is consistent in other areas, so that we know about it now and not in the future.
Do you have any explanation for how you missed it the first time around?
The only thing I can think of is that it's deteriorated over the last 6 years to a point where it's become this obvious. The stairs have been painted over time, and it's a possibility the paint obscured it. But
So are you saying it was a little problem 6 years ago and it's a big problem now?
it wasn't something that was uncovered 6 years ago, and
Okay.
now it's at a place where we need to replace it.
Does it make you worry that you may have missed something else?
I think in a renovation like this, that's the reason why you build in contingencies, because there's only so much you can possibly know. The drawings we had were not as-built drawings we worked from, that we received from the city. The existing condition drawings that we had were work that had been done to the buildings over a number of years. So from that, we were able to pull a lot of information together, but not everything. So we did as much as we could in terms of due diligence and looking into spaces that were concealed. And when Suffolk came on board, we were able to open up walls, which was important to see what was behind areas that were closed off to us because the building is occupied. So we feel much better today knowing the investigations that we've done. But that's the reason why we do have contingencies, because there may be some things that come up that need to be addressed as we continue the project.
Okay. And just once again, just for me, the $38 million, yes, that should be the end of it, right? That's nothing beyond that?
Yes, that will be.
Thanks.
Rick?
Quick question, Rex, I know we had everyone knows about the flood. Was there any surprises that we found when we opened up the walls that surprised you, or were they all exactly what you thought we would have found in there? Because I know there was some asbestos found in one area.
Yeah, no surprises, even for the asbestos that we found. No surprises from that work.
And I think that gave us a good example of what we'd be seeing the rest of the 22. Is most of it, some of you might not know, every wall in the basement was opened up. The entire thing 2 feet above the floor, which gave us a good idea of what was in there. But I know there was some asbestos that had been removed to some other abatements that had to take place, so I was just curious if that was what you were expecting and
I know exactly what you're talking about, and it was what we're expecting, and it's for when we go in and abate that building, that's a part of that scope that we've already picked up with the demo contractor.
Okay, thanks. And just shine a little light on the stairs. There was a set of stairs that had collapsed partially in January of 21. We closed that down, and then we had another one that fell just recently, and we had to close that one down. So after further inspection, we identified no less than 4 sets of stairs that were in very bad shape that need to be repaired. So again, I've been assured that was all would be covered under the contingency, but it was concerning. And I'll also say there was a concern that there was water mitigation, water infiltration through the basement that was not part of the original scope, which again, I would have thought that would have been caught in the original design renovations. So, I have to believe you when you say that the money that's allocated for the contingency is going to be enough. But I hope we don't have to come to this board again and say that that it's not. So again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think it's important for you all to know exactly what's happening.
Madam Manager, are you saying that there's 4 stairwells that have failed in the building right now?
There's 2 sets of stairs that have failed right now that are closed, and then there's 2 more that are in very bad shape that are under recommendations for design for repair. We haven't got those numbers. I know we got cost estimated for the first set of stairs that happened in 21, and I believe it was $95,000. And that was just one set of stairs from the ground level to the first floor. That wasn't anticipating anything from the first floor to the bottom floor. So it will be significant. I mean, it certainly be significant, as well be the water mitigation abatement for the basement.
Do you think water caused the problem for the stairs too?
It's been happening for over years.
Yep.
Stairs are 100 years old. It's evident by the fact that it's that first floor going to that ground level floor going to the first floor that's really caused by salt and water. And so, my opinion,
yeah,
it should have been caught. It was evident to me. It's one of those things again. So,
when they're doing the inspection and looking in the walls, are you there, or is there somebody from the school department or the city there with them?
That's
Out of the
escorting
original
them?
walkthrough, well, with the design phase, myself and representatives from Perkins Eastman crawled through the building, and really, when I say crawled through the buildings, we crawled through HVAC vents, through the tunnels. We did a lot of investigating into that work. So I was very confident that we had found everything. It was a surprise to me that that was not in the original scope.
Okay.
So certainly concerning, as was the water mitigation that needs to take place for the basement. With the amount of time we spent in investigating all the hazards and abatements that needed to get done, I was quite surprised, so.
Okay, thanks.
And it's my understanding that those stairs are being repaired, they're being advanced, and it's under preparation now to repair those stairs. They're not waiting till the 1922 building, obviously. Mr. Samaras.
Thank you. No, I just want to, the senator restated my question, as did the superintendent. I think what we're all looking for is, okay, what the process was, okay? It's today, from today on. That's what concerns people, as what's being stated right now. We don't want to see any more surprises. Will there be surprises? Probably. But the issue is, the more communications, the better off everybody is. That's the whole thing. And we need you to set up a different type of, because what I've heard in past meetings was you're afraid of if the bids are out, if information is released, it creates a financial situation for you with the bid system and what have you. But there are other ways of describing climate or having meetings, and as the senator stated, we could have a 10-minute meeting. We've been part of that over the past. But the thing is, one month it was a 10-minute meeting, the next month it's an hour and a half. And there's open dialogue and questions are asked, answers are given, and it just creates a stronger atmosphere. And that's what we need at this particular point.
And
atmosphere. Thank you.
And there's been motions to reinstate the monthly meetings, and that's going to happen, Mr. Samaras. Mr. Elliott.
Just briefly, to me, this is all good information, and the second time I've seen the presentation, but to me, the task before us is how to solve this $38.5 million funding gap. We embarked in this project years ago when the reimbursement from the state was about 79.8%. Based on some of the costs that are not eligible, we're down to about 66%, 67%. Seems to me, given the circumstances, I would hope the SBA would look at the impact that it has on this community, because we went into this affording a $270 million project, which is substantially changed. I mean, the impact on this community with an additional $38 million over 30 years has a domino effect on our ability to fund other capital projects that are enormous. So can we go back? Shouldn't we go back to the MSBA and try to find some parity with the funding percentage that clearly has changed significantly since we embarked on this project?
So I can answer that. In anticipation of this, we did have a meeting with the MSBA to inquire. Obviously, the project funding agreement that we entered into with them for 270 plus the total budget of $343 million was done in 2019. Obviously, no one, as has been stated, knew COVID was coming or what effect it would have on the bid process or the cost of materials and construction. We did put that question directly to the MSBA. Can they revisit the project funding agreement? Because if these escalations were known, they would be eligible costs if they had been built into the budget in 2019. For reasons that we talked about, we couldn't have built it into the budget because we didn't know what what impact COVID was going to have. They were understanding. They were understood the plight of the city. But they made it clear that once they enter a project funding agreement, they don't amend it. It had to do with the way they go out for bonds and so forth. They also mentioned that they did not get ARPA funding from the state. So, in other words, if they had gotten ARPA funding to make these adjustments, that might be a different story, but they did not. And we discussed the city petitioning the state, the Commonwealth, the legislature, and the governor to make up the state's portion of this overage in the proportional percentage, so that the city of Lowell is not bearing 100%, because that was never the deal of the project funding agreement. And they'd be supportive of us in this regard. The city council voted to do just that last week, and to pursue the state paying their portion, whether it's through ARPA dollars or whatever mechanism. I will say we had a very productive meeting with the delegation this week discussing this, as well as with Congresswoman Trahan's office, because we've also asked Congresswoman Trahan's office to be involved, especially around the ARPA dollars in U.S. Treasury. So those are works in progress, Rodney, that will be happening, and that's one avenue that the city is definitely pursuing. As I said, the council voted for that. We've begun the discussion and are working on that as well. Okay. Other questions? So, next steps. I think I just summarized one of the next steps, and that is to pursue contribution from the state for that portion of this overage. As far as what can the city do for its share of this, there's a couple of avenues, and that as we move forward will be discussed. Our ARPA dollars, the city's allotment of ARPA dollars eligible to be used. That's been a discussion we've had, and as I said, it's an ongoing discussion with Congresswoman Trahan's office and the Treasury Department to see where that goes. And all of these efforts may take some time working through the legislature. We do have a loan order amendment on the council agenda for Tuesday, and that's before the council as far as amending it with the, not necessarily borrowing the money, but authorizing it, and at the same time pursuing parallel track of seeking the funds elsewhere.
So, let me just add to that, I suppose, that the delegation did meet with, did have a meeting this week, so this is actually, if you're not watching the first city council meeting on TV, this is my third time.
Okay.
Going forward.
Could you use the microphone? Sorry. I just want to make sure people can hear you at home.
I'm just a little rusty from being here, I guess. The going forward, are we going to meet monthly or
That is the plan. There was a motion to have monthly meetings. That is the plan, and I've spoken to. Well, I'll hold it at that. But yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I would move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you very much.